She was the first imperial princess to be sent to the guillotine, but no one felt sympathy for her. In the past, just one of her meals cost as much as a commoner's monthly income, and she treated her servants with cruelty, punishing them with beatings and insults. If she found them displeasing, she would fire them on the spot. Even during a great famine, when countless people starved to death, she merely laughed upon hearing the news. Then she continued her life of extreme luxury. But as a neighboring country stirred the unrest, the starving citizens finally revolted, burning down the entire royal capital. As the imperial princess, she was captured and locked away in a filthy, dark dungeon for 3 long years. During those years, she was denied baths, given only rotten vegetables and moldy bread, and constantly mocked by the soldiers. After enduring 3 years of torment, she was finally led to the guillotine. The weather was freezing that day, yet the square was packed with people shouting for her execution, mocking her as the spoiled princess and demanding her beheading. Without shoes, her feet were red and swollen from the cold, but she walked slowly, trying to delay her fate. When the blade fell, she didn't resist. Her blood splattered onto the diary she had been writing for 8 years. But the story didn't end there. Time rewound. The princess suddenly sat up, realizing she had returned to 8 years in the past. At first, she thought it was just a nightmare, but the blood-stained diary in her hands proved that everything had really happened. She carefully recorded everything that happened each day. After 3 years of eating spoiled food, even the yellow moon tomatoes she once despised now made her so happy that she cried. The head chef standing nearby was terrified, thinking her cooking had made the princess cry from how terrible it was. The maids watching her were completely stunned. Was this really the same arrogant and willful princess? This was probably the first time she had ever shown gratitude to anyone. But what shocked them even more was what happened next. A maid delivering a cake tripped over a small lion cub and fell face first into the dessert, ruining it before anyone could even take a bite. In the past, the princess would have furiously kicked the maid multiple times, but this time, her reaction was completely different. Instead of punishing the red-haired maid, she made her a personal attendant, because she recognized her. During the 3 years she was imprisoned, not a single person came to visit her, except for this red-haired maid, who would check on her whenever she had time. Even on the day of her execution, the maid had come to brush her hair. During those painful years, she had been the princess's only light. Now that she was back as a princess, she was determined to repay her. To experience the hardships of ordinary people, the princess asked the red-haired maid to buy some commoners' food for her because she wanted to immerse herself in their lives. She could no longer say foolish things like, "If there's no bread, why not eat meat?" According to her diary, in 8 years she would be sent to the guillotine. To avoid that tragic fate, the princess wanted to change. But she knew nothing about politics or economics. And even with knowledge of future events, altering destiny was no simple task. This princess was once executed by her own people due to her arrogance. But after her death, she found herself reborn 8 years in the past, back in her younger self's body. Determined not to repeat her past mistakes, the first thing she did after reincarnating was seek out the one person who could save the empire. In her previous life, this bespectacled man had fought alone to restore the crumbling empire, but ultimately failed due to a lack of support. This time, she was determined to fully utilize his abilities. In truth, the princess had a poor impression of him in her past life, as their first meeting had been anything but pleasant. A person who lacks communication skills, no matter how talented, will struggle to gain influence. Even now, when Mia recalls that day, she grits her teeth in frustration. But to avoid that terrifying guillotine, she still extended a helping hand to the bespectacled man before he was demoted. Although the circumstances had changed, their first meeting played out just like in her previous life. The bespectacled man's first words were a sharp question. Did Mia even know how much her extravagant meals cost? He assumed that the spoiled princess wouldn't understand. However, Mia responded effortlessly. She passionately delivered a long-winded speech, leaving the bespectacled man in awe. To him, the princess sounded like a genius, her words perfectly aligned with his own thoughts. Little did he know, Mia was simply repeating his own teachings. In her past life, He had scolded her with these exact words, infuriating her to the point that she wrote them down in her diary as a humiliation. Today, that same diary helped her turn the situation in her favor. By the time Mia finished her monologue, the bespectacled man was so impressed that he dropped to his knees. Just like that, reciting a page from her diary had won over a key ally. In her previous life, after Mia was imprisoned, the bespectacled man had visited her and even shed tears upon seeing her suffering. Like her loyal maid Anna, he was someone she could trust. With these two invaluable allies by her side, Mia noticed that parts of her diary were beginning to change. History was already shifting. However, later entries remained the same, indicating that she still had to work hard to escape her doomed fate. According to her diary, a devastating plague would soon break out in the imperial capital. Determined to prepare, Mia ventured into the filthiest slums, a place even commoners avoided. The stench was unbearable, forcing everyone to cover their noses, but Mia remained unfazed. The 3 years she had spent in prison had smelled far worse. She shared her pastries with starving children who were too weak to move, understanding their suffering firsthand because she, too, had once felt the agony of hunger. The diary explicitly stated that the plague would wipe out 1/10 of the imperial capital's population, severely weakening the empire's power. Determined to prevent this disaster, Mia made it her mission to stop the plague before it even began. Once again, the bespectacled man was left in shock. He had been fighting desperately to solve the financial crisis, but had never considered that a single epidemic could completely cripple the empire's economy. Yet Mia had foreseen it in advance. In that moment, her status in his eyes skyrocketed. However, preventing a plague required 2 key measures. First, ensuring that the people had enough food to strengthen their bodies. Second, building hospitals to treat the sick. Unfortunately, the empire's finances were in shambles and couldn't support such efforts. Resolving herself, Mia removed her favorite hairpin. She felt a deep sense of loss, but she knew that if she didn't take action now, the hairpin would be stolen from her in the future anyway, just like everything else before she met her fate at the guillotine. Rather than waiting for that day, she chose to sell it now to protect herself. But no matter how valuable the hairpin was, it wouldn't be enough. However, seeing the once spoiled princess making such a sacrifice, the nobles who had already lost hope followed her example. The bespectacled man used the collected money to build a grand hospital, and Mia's reputation among the common people began to improve. When her little maid went to buy supplies, shopkeepers, upon hearing they were for the princess, refused to take any payment. Mia had unknowingly won over the hearts of the people. Anna's younger sister Alice was bedridden, so Mia bought some sweets to visit her. Alice was deeply moved and showed Mia a story she had written. The moment Mia saw it, memories of her previous life flooded back. In that dark prison cell, the only solace she had was Anna reading stories to her. She never expected that those stories were written by Alice herself. Unfortunately, in her past life, the story had no ending. Alice had died from her illness before she could finish it. Determined to change fate, Mia took Alice under her wing as her personal writer, hoping that the better living conditions in the royal palace would improve her health. With this, Mia gained another devoted follower. Later, Alice wrote a book titled The Legend of Saint Princess Mia, which nearly deified Mia among the common people. Ever since her rebirth, Mia had been doing everything to avoid the guillotine. In her previous life, her empire had been easily overthrown, mainly because no neighboring country had come to its aid. To prevent history from repeating itself, she decided to use her time at school to befriend as many princes and princesses from other nations as possible. That way, if her empire faced another crisis, she could call upon foreign troops for help. Her first target was Prince Abel. His kingdom, Lemno, wasn't a major power, but it was the strongest among mid-tier nations. Moreover, he was only the second prince, meaning his chances of inheriting the throne were low. This made him the perfect candidate to recruit as a potential political ally, or even as a royal consort. With a marriage alliance, securing military aid from Lemno in times of crisis would be a given. So, Mia planned to win Abel over as her lover. She even devised a perfect scenario for their fateful encounter. Mia would walk ahead, deliberately dropping her handkerchief. Any true gentleman would naturally pick it up for her. That would be her chance to invite Abel to be her dance partner for the entrance ball. It was a flawless plan. But when she dropped the handkerchief and waited, nothing happened. Turning back, she saw Abel completely ignoring it, too busy flirting with another girl. Of course, that was just who he was, playful and flirtatious. Before Mia could come up with a new plan, someone else had already picked up the handkerchief. It was Cyan. Mia froze. She didn't want to be involved with Cyan in any way. This was bad. Worse still, Cyan instantly recognized the handkerchief. A few days ago, Mia had lent it to Diana when she was crying, and now Cyan had seen it and knew it belonged to her. Taking advantage of this, Cyan approached Mia and formally invited her to be his dance partner for the entrance ball. Mia wanted to refuse with every fiber of her being, but she didn't dare. Because when she looked at Cyan, all she could see was that guillotine. As Mia wrestled with her dilemma, she suddenly spotted Abel's older brother scolding him. Seizing the opportunity, she quickly slipped away. Abel was a carefree prince, often causing trouble and earning his brother's reprimands. But to Mia, he was her ideal romantic candidate. This was the perfect chance to step in, rescue him, and get to know him better. At first, Abel's older brother saw Mia as just a young girl and tried to scare her away with a stern act. But Mia had spent 3 whole years being terrorized by the Revolutionary Army in her past life. Compared to that nightmare, the threats of this young man meant absolutely nothing to her. Thank you for watching.